Some mistakes follow you down the highway, packed neatly inside taped-up cardboard boxes, waiting for the exact moment your life is finally starting to feel settled before they trip you up. For Leo, that moment arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a third-floor walk-up in Andersonville, Chicago, right as the last box of his newly reorganized life hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. He had spent 3 weeks painting walls, hanging thrift store art, and convincing himself that moving 3 neighborhoods away from his old life was the same thing as outgrowing it. At 34, Leo was allergic to loose ends, which was why he kept his apartment obsessively tidy and his calendar strictly color-coded. But loose ends have a habit of hiding in the bottom flaps of standard-issue Home Depot boxes, beneath layers of bubble wrap and forgotten college textbooks. He sliced open a plain brown carton labeled simply, "Kitchen Miscellaneous, Fall." Inside, beneath a jumble of mismatched silverware and coffee mugs, sat a thick, leather-bound notebook with water-stained edges. It wasn't his. Or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. Leo sat back on his heels, the radiator hissing a dry, metallic rhythm against the chill of an early November wind rattling the window panes. He opened the cover, and there, scrawled in urgent, looping handwriting on the very first page, was a street address 3 miles south in Lincoln Square and a name he hadn't spoken out loud in 4 years. Her name was Maya, and according to the hasty post-it note stuck to page 42, she had been keeping track of a city they used to share long after the rest of their shared world had quietly dissolved. The note wasn't a love letter, it was an inventory of things left behind, wrapped in memories that neither of them had ever truly figured out how to throw away. Back when they lived together in a cramped apartment off Western Avenue, life had been a series of narrow margins and deferred dreams. Maya worked double shifts at a neighborhood bakery while finishing her master's degree in graphic design, and Leo bounced between freelance web gigs and late-night sound engineering for local indie bands. They had loved each other with the fierce, exhausting intensity of 20-something apartment dwellers who thought passion could pay the electric bill. But passion, as it turns out, is a terrible thermal conductor when the winter wind blows off Lake Michigan and the landlord threatens to turn off the heat. Their breakup hadn't been explosive or cinematic, which somehow made it worse. It had been an orderly, tragic dismantling of a life over cheap takeout and quiet tears. They divided the toaster, flipped a coin for the floor lamp, and promised each other they would both go on to do the big things they always talked about. And they did. Maya landed a job designing brand identities for sustainable agriculture companies, moving across town to a loft that smelled of fresh pine and ambition. Leo stayed in the music scene, eventually securing a stable gig managing audio production for commercial podcasts, trading late-night dive bars for a corporate desk job with dental benefits. From the outside, it looked like success. From the inside, it looked like 2 parallel train tracks running across the flat expanse of the Midwest, never touching, never colliding, just humming with the dull vibration of separate routines. Leo stared at the address in the notebook, his thumb tracing the indentation of the ink. The box had clearly been swapped during the chaotic weekend 4 years ago when friends with an oversized U-Haul had rushed them both out of the old building in a single afternoon. In the rush to clear the lease, belongings had crossed enemy lines, ending up in closets where they didn't belong. He told himself to put the book back in the box, tape it shut, and drop it off at a shipping center with a polite, typed note. It was the sensible thing to do, the adult thing to do, the kind of clean break that kept old ghosts safely locked in the attic of the past. Instead, he found himself grabbing his heavy wool coat from the hallway hook and walking out the door into the steel-gray Chicago dusk. The air smelled of damp pavement and wood smoke from someone's fireplace down the block, the kind of sharp, autumn chill that makes you want to pull your collar up and walk faster. His Honda Civic groaned to life in the alley, scraping a thin layer of frost from the windshield as he guided the car south toward Lincoln Square. The traffic on Lawrence Avenue was thick with delivery trucks and commuters rushing home to warm apartments, the red tail lights bleeding into the wet asphalt like spilled paint. As he drove, his mind raced through the rehearsed conversations he might have if she actually opened the door. Hey. So, I was unpacking a box from 4 years ago and, well, here is your old sketchbook. It sounded pathetic, even in his own head. It sounded like an excuse to see if her eyes still crinkled at the corners when she laughed. He parked half a block away from the brick courtyard building listed in the notebook, sitting with his hands resting on the steering wheel while the heater hummed a hot, dry draft into his face. The windows of the second-floor apartment glowed with a warm, amber light, casting long, fractured shadows across the lace curtains. For 5 minutes, he didn't move. He watched a woman in a mustard yellow sweater walk past the window, carrying a stack of oversized cardboard folders, and felt a familiar, sharp ache in his chest. That was Maya's silhouette, unmistakable even through frosted glass, the way she carried her shoulders, the quick, impatient tuck of her dark hair behind her ear. He got out of the car, his leather boots crunching against the gravel lining the walkway. The courtyard was quiet, tucked away from the roar of the main street, smelling faintly of fallen leaves and wet brick. He climbed the iron stairs, each step echoing in the enclosed well of the building, his stomach tightening into a hard, cold knot. When he reached apartment 2B, he stood in front of the green wooden door for a long time, his hand hovering inches away from the brass knocker. He could hear muffled music playing inside, an old folk record they used to listen to on lazy Sunday mornings when neither of them had anywhere to be. He didn't knock. Instead, he reached down, set the heavy notebook and the box neatly on the welcome mat, and stepped back toward the stairs, ready to turn around and drive home to his empty, perfectly ordered apartment. Before his boot could find the first step down, the door swung open with a sharp click. Maya stood in the doorway, holding a wooden spoon in one hand and an apron tied tightly around her waist, her eyes wide with surprise as she looked from the box on the floor up to Leo's face. For a second, neither of them breathed. The ambient noise of the city seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of the wind sighing through the wrought iron balcony railings above them. "Leo," she said, her voice dropping into that familiar, quiet register that used to anchor him during his worst anxiety spirals. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" He swallowed hard, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets to hide the slight tremor in his fingers. "I was unpacking some old kitchen stuff. From the move. 4 years ago." She looked down at the cardboard box on the mat, then back up at him, a slow, knowing smile touching the corners of her mouth, not a bitter smile, but one of deep, shared history. "You found the notebook." "I found the notebook," he admitted, taking a half step forward into the warm light spilling out from her hallway. "It had your old address crossed out, but I recognized your handwriting on the margins. You were sketching package designs for that local coffee roaster back then." "I was," she said, leaning against the doorframe, her posture relaxing just a fraction as she crossed her arms over her apron. "God, I was so stressed out back then. I thought if my work wasn't revolutionary, my life was a waste of time. Weren't we all?" Leo let out a dry, self-deprecating laugh, the tension in his shoulders finally beginning to ease. "I thought if I didn't get my mixes on a major streaming playlist by 28, I was practically a failure." "And now," she asked softly, her gaze steady and probing, looking straight past his polite defenses into the tired reality of who he had become. "Now I manage audio files for corporate podcasts and my apartment has matching throw pillows," he said, meeting her eyes. "It's clean. It's quiet. Nobody leaves dirty coffee mugs on the coffee table. But sometimes it feels like a museum of a person I decided to be." Maya looked down at the floorboards between them for a moment, listening to the music drift out from her kitchen, the faint acoustic guitar notes filling the empty space of the hallway. When she looked back up, her eyes were bright with a complicated mixture of fondness and hesitation. "Come inside," she said, stepping aside to let him pass. "The soup is about to boil over, and honestly, you look like you haven't eaten a decent vegetable in a week." Stepping into her apartment felt like walking through a portal into an alternate timeline where their story hadn't broken apart. The space was filled with the clutter of a creative life in progress, stacks of art books on the radiator covers, dried eucalyptus hanging from copper hooks in the kitchen, and watercolor palettes scattered across a large oak drafting table near the window. It was warm, slightly chaotic, and intensely alive. Leo stood awkwardly by the kitchen island while Maya stirred a pot of lentil soup, the rich aroma of garlic and cumin filling the small room. She moved with an easy grace that he had forgotten he missed so acutely, her movements unhurried and deliberate. "So, you never married the girl from your PR firm?" she asked casually, not looking up from the stove as she adjusted the flame. Leo blinked, surprised. "Sarah? No. That fizzled out 2 years ago. We wanted different things. She wanted a condo in the Gold Coast and endless charity galas. I wanted to sleep in on Sundays and occasionally watch documentaries about deep-sea fishing. How about you? The guy with the vintage motorcycle and the architecture firm?" Maya let out a short, sharp laugh, shaking her head. "Marcus? Oh, he was lovely, but he talked about load-bearing walls even when we were eating Thai takeout on the couch. I realized I didn't want a project, I wanted a partner who could sit in comfortable silence with me. Silence settled over the kitchen again, but this time it wasn't heavy or defensive. It was the kind of comfortable quiet that only comes from people who already know all of each other's hidden chapters. She poured 2 bowls of soup and handed him a heavy ceramic mug filled with water, gesturing toward a small wooden dining table pushed against the brick wall. They sat down opposite each other, the streetlights outside casting long, amber patterns across the tabletop. "Why didn't you throw the box away, Leo?" she asked quietly, resting her spoon against the rim of her bowl. 4 years is a long time to keep someone else's junk in your closet. He looked down at his bowl, tracing the rim with his thumb. Because throwing it away felt like admitting that we were a mistake, he thought. Because part of me was always waiting for an excuse to see if you still existed out here in the real world, away from the memory of how we fell apart. "I guess I'm bad at throwing things away," he said aloud, offering a weak smile. "I like to keep things where I can find them, even if I don't know what to do with them anymore." "Some things aren't meant to be filed away in a box, Leo," she said, her voice dropping into a register that made his heart skip a beat. "Some things are just part of the foundation. Even if you remodel the house, the old pipes are still underneath the floors." They spent the next 2 hours talking about everything and nothing: mutual friends who had moved to Denver, bands that had broken up, the way the neighborhood had changed, and the strange, disorienting reality of reaching your mid-30s and realizing that nobody has it all figured out. There was no grand movie-style declaration of undying love, no sudden revelation that they were meant to live happily ever after starting tonight. Life doesn't work that way, and neither did they. They were older now, scarred by past failures and cautious about building new hopes on shaky ground. When Leo finally stood up to leave, the city outside had grown colder, the frost on the car windshields turning into a hard, crystalline crust. Maya walked him to the door, her hands tucked into the pockets of her sweater. "Thanks for bringing the notebook back," she said softly, leaning against the doorframe as the hallway light cast a warm glow across her hair. "Thanks for the soup," he replied, his hand resting on the brass doorknob. He hesitated for a second, feeling the familiar weight of the choice before him, the choice to walk away to his quiet, safe apartment, or to leave the door open just a crack. "Are you around this weekend?" he asked, the words coming out before he could overthink them. "There's a vinyl fair at the record shop on Lincoln Avenue on Saturday morning. I hear they have some old pressings from that folk label we used to like." Maya looked at him for a long, measuring moment, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face, the exact crinkle at the corners of her eyes that he had memorized 4 years ago. "Pick me up at 10, she said. "And don't be late. You know I hate waiting around." Leo walked down the iron stairs into the cool Chicago night, his boots crunching on the gravel, the heavy winter air filling his lungs with something that felt remarkably like hope. He got into his car, turned the key, and for the first time in years, didn't check his rearview mirror to see what he was leaving behind.